Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Spirit of Liberty broadcast. Appreciate you joining me live this afternoon and hope you get a blessing from the program. Oh, hang on a second. I got echo going. I thought I got rid of that. There we go. I got my video on there so I could see the live chat. I always attempt to pay attention to that, but I typically get sidetracked. And so, make sure you join me on there. And good to see Brant Lawler on there right now. I am doing well. Thank you for that. And today I'm going to be, probably for the next few weeks, I'm hoping to be talking about finances. Finances are obviously a huge thing in people's lives. It's a great cause of stress in many people's lives. A lot of marriage problems are due to financial things. And so I'm hoping to maybe share some principles over the next few weeks that will be a help, because I'm amazed at how little people are taught when it comes to finances. And most people too, young men, when they start their lives out, nobody teaches them how to do a budget. Nobody teaches them, about debt and about, just how much can I afford? Because a lot of people are getting in trouble because they've got banks telling them what they can afford. They've got a bank telling you, hey, you can be approved for this much money or this big of a loan, and you could afford this house payment, and you could afford this car payment. And people are always telling you you can afford all these things. And the truth is, you really can't afford those things. And there is no way that these people at the bank, know just from looking up some things, where you are on that. And people, there needs to be more teaching on this subject. And so I would definitely recommend read some Dave Ramsey books. I really like his books, especially Total Money Makeover. I think that's a really good book. I would read pretty much anything of his, or recommend anything of his when it comes to this subject. In fact, the title of today's program I stole from him, Act Your Wage. That's something I've heard him say many times, and I just can't think of a better way to say it than that, Act Your Wage, which is what we're going to talk about today. So I hope this will be a help. Next week's program is going to be pre-recorded. I'm hoping to have a guest on that one, but I'm going to be at camp next week, at a junior camp, and so I won't be able to be here live, but looking forward to that program. Hello, Brother Matt. Good to see you on the live chat as well. And also the church split. Good to see them on the live chat too. Hoping to get in a fight with them pretty soon over a doctrinal subject that they're getting ready to address. I'm sure that will be fun, as it always is. Good to see Randall Wegman on there as well, and appreciate everybody joining. If you have any questions, again, put them on there. A lot of times I get sidetracked, but I do want to, I guess before I get into the main subject, let me do one thing on here that I think is, that I wanted to get to. So first off, when it comes to, I'm not going to read this whole thing here, but when it comes to financial issues, one thing that, financial problems, it causes a lot of problems. And one of the things, it affects you physically. Financial stress, is such a huge burden for a lot of people. And there's an article here about ways it will affect you physically. I'm not going to read all the details of this, but it will make you lose sleep, and not getting enough sleep affects you physically. Less money for preventative care. A lot of people, they can't afford, maybe to buy vitamins and things that they can need, or they're buying cheap, junky food because of the fact that they can't buy the better stuff. Financial reasons they do that. Increased levels of anxiety and depression. And look how much that affects things. And look how many people are dealing with the side effects of drugs that deal with anxiety and depression. They're dealing with all those problems and the reason that they're depressed and having anxiety is because of financial problems. So, there's kind of a chain reaction. When your finances get out of control, everything can get out of control. A greater risk of cancer, heart disease, and stroke, increased heart rate and blood pressure, greater numbers of digestive problems like ulcers, constipation, diarrhea. And folks, some of those things are very difficult to live with. And if we can avoid some of those things, what a blessing that would be. Hair loss. That might be, let me tell you, I've had some financial stress over the years. I'm pretty sure my hair loss is genetic, but at the same time, I don't know. Maybe I've pretty much always been poor. Decreased libido. I won't say a whole lot about that, but we don't want that problem. Dental issues and gum disease. Increased risk of diabetes, breakouts and skin problem, weight gain or loss, joint pain, coping with stress through unhealthy behaviors. A lot of bad behavior people have is because they go to these things as just kind of a way to get away from their problems. And so they turn to the drinking, alcohol, drugs. They want to forget about their financial problems for a little bit. And then as a result, they spend money on these things, getting them in worse trouble. And then getting all the side effects that come with those things. And, so obviously, if we can get our finances under control, we're going to be in a much better place. And so, and the last thing says shortness of breath. And so there's a lot of articles that you can read on that. And so good to see Isaiah also on there. And Isaiah, didn't you just post that you got engaged or something too? So, man, you're gonna get in all kinds of financial trouble there. Women are expensive. They're worth it, but expensive. But Church Split also said it's so true. I work in an industry where people make $250 plus a year, yet so many still struggle financially because they don't know how to be okay living within simple means. And that is 100% true. That at the end of the day, while salary is important, obviously you need to make money to survive and do things. It's all about being smart with your money. And there is no end of stupidity that we can find ourselves in, that even if you make a lot of money, you can still have every one of these problems that we talked about. A lot of people think, how many of you, if you could make an extra $50,000 a year, that would solve all your problems. And the truth is, you think, oh man, I wouldn't have any more problems then. Well, actually, you probably would, because, your same behavior, your same priorities that got you in the mess you're in now are just going to carry over with you, and you're still going to have problems. And so the thing that you need to get a hold of that I really want to push today is just understanding, where you belong financially, because we have what we talk about in this country, different classes. You got your lower class, you got your middle class, you got your upper class. And the funny thing is, everyone thinks they're middle class. Everybody does. It's like everybody thinks they're middle class. And the truth is, a lot of people aren't. And even if you are middle class, that kind of covers a really broad range. And so the truth is, there's a lot of factors there. And I'm telling you, it will be a great day in your life when some of you get a hold of the fact that you're poor, that you're lower class. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to talk down to anybody. Okay? But some of you are poor. You are lower class. Okay? And let me just say, it was a great day when I got a hold of the fact that I am, financially speaking, in the lower class. Okay? I'm there too. So don't get offended by this, but I want to read an article to you that I thought was interesting, because I was talking about this with somebody the other day. Everybody thinks they're middle class. Everyone. It sounds like it's storming all of a sudden outside right now, so hopefully I don't lose internet. If I lose you, that might be why. But here in this article, I'm not going to show it on the screen. I'm just going to read a few parts of it. But it says, where do I fall in the American economic class system? Let me ask all of you watching right now, where do you fall? Who are you lower, middle, or upper class? Nobody wants to say they're lower class. Well, I'm lower, middle class. We'll say something like that, or I'm in the upper lower class. I don't know. We all in our mind. And here's the thing too, however you'll answer that, in your mind, you see yourself with a certain group of people. Obviously, we all know none of us are with the elites and with the billionaires and the Elon Musks and things like that. But we also don't see ourselves, in that lower poverty class, with the low lives of society. But we do see ourselves as belonging to a certain group. And a lot of times, because people have a higher opinion of where they are financially than they actually are, they end up getting themselves in a lot of financial trouble. And so I want to read some of this. It says, understanding where you fall in the American economic class system isn't as simple as pulling out a calculator or looking at a pay stub. That's what a lot of people think. Well, I make this much money a year, so therefore I'm in the middle class. And the thing is, too, you look at what's considered middle class. There's a big range there. Somebody just asked, I make $50,000 a year. What's that? Okay. It depends on a lot of things. We'll see that here in a little bit. So when asked how they identify their social class, 72% of Americans said they belong to the middle or working classes, according to a 2020 survey from Gallup. In determining their social class, people often don't just think about income, experts say, but about other factors, including education, location, and family history. And it's interesting, too. So 72% think that they are middle class. And that's why politicians always act like they're the candidate for the middle class. Because then everybody thinks, oh, that's me. I need to vote for them. Because everyone thinks they're in the middle class. But larger economic trends may also impact how people view their class rank. In recent years, economic trends, such as high rates of inflation, waves of employee resignations, struggling small businesses, and other effects of the coronavirus pandemic, have impacted the wealth and health of workers and businesses. Unfortunately, recent class-related data, which is from 2019, don't take into consideration the economic damage caused by the pandemic, and we won't see the impact on the numbers until 2022 or later. So the thing is, in this article, it's a little old, because just in the last several months, we have seen huge inflation. Things have completely changed. Okay, what I was making at the beginning of 2020, okay, I felt was pretty good. I was, pretty excited about finally being to that point, but at the same time, that's completely different 2 years later. Okay, the Biden, not the Putin gas prices, the Biden gas prices are horrible. Grocery prices, everything is up like crazy. So it's really hard to give a number when it comes to this, and so people can, I guess, to judge what's lower, middle, and upper class. And so the thing is, and I'm not going to read this whole thing, but right here it says, what is middle class income? And this is what this says, and understand this. So this is a little dated because a lot's changed in the last couple of years. But it says Pew Research defines middle income Americans as those whose annual household income is 2/3 to double the national median, adjusted for local cost of living and household size. So for a family of three, that ranges from $52,200 to $156,600 when the 2018 incomes used in a Pew study are adjusted for inflation from 2018 to 2021. So right there, about 52,000, according to that, you're getting into the middle class, but that's if you have a family of three. And it also mentions on here, depending on location. And so again, a lot of times people, they make the mistake in, when they're listening to advice of somebody or reading an article, of just thinking it's a one size fits all thing. And when it comes to, your income and just how much it actually is and, what class you fit in, a lot of it depends on where you live. There's a big difference in your expenses if you live in a city versus if you live in rural country like we do out here. Our cost of living in Rock Falls is a lot lower than it is in certain parts of Chicago, or especially in the suburbs where everything is really expensive. It's different from state to state. I was just in Colorado, and I was shocked at how much everything costs in Colorado. Things are really crazy expensive out there. California is another place where things are crazy. So the thing is, if somebody says, well, $50,000, you're in the middle class, well, in some places probably, but in other places, not at all. Some people back, well, I make six figures. Okay. But again, where do you live? What is the size of your family? That 52,000, that's if there's only 3. I've got 10 in my family. And if you go on that article, there's actually a link on there where there's you can enter your state, the area you live, your income, and all these things, and it will tell you what class that you're in. It put me in the lower class. All right. I'm offended. I'm poor. I need Biden to give me some more welfare, apparently. But I've got a lot of kids. Okay. Now here's the thing. I'm just going to give you my opinion of myself. Okay. Financially speaking, income wise, I guess I'm in the lower class, but I don't believe I live like a lower class person. I personally think that my standard of living, how I live, is pretty good. But a lot of that too, it's because I'm not making a lot of the dumb decisions a lot of middle class people are making. Because again, there's a lot of things you got to factor in. Okay, I don't have a super high salary, but at the same time too, I have a bunch of kids. So I've got that working against me. But I also live in an area that's not real expensive. I don't really have any debt. The only debt that I have is my house. And when you look at my mortgage debt compared to what I have, I'm doing pretty good there too, because I've lived in my house for 9 years. I refinanced it last year, knocking 6 years off my loan. I did all this before a lot of this crazy inflation stuff, and so when they did the and I got my house at a good price when I bought it too. So whenever they did the appraisal, our house appraised like double what I bought it at. So, because I've stayed in one house for a long time, I'm in a pretty good situation right there. Some people, they move around so much and they're constantly getting new loans and new mortgages and refinances. They never get ahead. They never do. But I will say, those 9 years, it was tough for a long time paying the mortgage, but I'm glad I stayed in there, because now most people, even in this area, the average rent is way above what I'm paying on a mortgage for a house that I own on 3 acres in the country. So there's a lot, there's a lot of things, so really what it comes down to is your expenses. And this is what people, they don't realize. Some people have major expenses that others don't have. It's not just a number. It's not just about what your salary is. It's about your expenses. So understand, if you're somebody who, you graduated from college and got a liberal arts degree, and you've got thousands and thousands of dollars in student loans out there and you can't find a job, or you do find a job, but it's the same as mine, I'm going to be better off than you, because I don't have all that debt. I don't have, all those loans. And there's a lot of people out there. Yeah, you got a job and you're barely making six figures, but you've got massive debt from student loans because you just felt it was your birthright to go to college, even though you couldn't afford it, even though you didn't have the money for it. Sometimes we just got to admit there's some things that we can't afford to do. We shouldn't be spending money that we don't have. Some people, they just feel like because it's their birthright, that they deserve to live in this nice, fancy neighborhood, that with high taxes and all that. But wait a minute, why do you deserve that? Can you afford it? And, what makes you think, why aren't you looking at houses, in the cheap area of town? That's what your budget, says you should be living in. But people don't know that. They just think of themselves as like these middle class people. So they go and they get a mortgage they can't afford in some nice middle class neighborhood. And then they find themselves in major financial stress all the time. Some people just need to get a hold of the fact that you can't afford to live in the nice neighborhood. And you know what? Try telling that to this generation. This generation has such an entitlement mentality when it comes to everything. They think that they should be doing everything everyone else is doing. And, they call it equality. But folks, I get it. We should have equal rights, and the government shouldn't treat poor people different than it treats rich people. But here's the thing: rich people, they can afford more than poor people, and it's not the government's job to equal all that out. That's not how these things are supposed to work. And you know what? Some people need to get a hold of the fact that there are some things I shouldn't be doing. There's places I shouldn't be living. There are cars that I shouldn't be driving. Some of you do. You feel that you are in the same class of people, that drive certain vehicles. But if you don't have the money for it, you shouldn't be doing it. Some of you should be driving cheap, used vehicles. But you're not doing that because that commercial, convinced you deserve this vehicle. Why? Why do you deserve to drive a car like that if you don't have the income for it? Why do you deserve to live in a house that nice when you don't have the income for it? And just because a bank is willing to give you a loan and just because you can make it happen doesn't mean you should. You are putting yourself in a bad situation, and we've got to be wise in our spending. And so that's the thing. While I've never had a huge income, I've always managed to keep my expenses pretty low. Some people, I've been known to be a cheapskate. And it's not that I'm a cheapskate, it's just I couldn't afford these other things. And the Bible even says in Proverbs 21:20, there is treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spendeth it up. And folks, we're to the point now where we're not only spending up everything we have, but we're going into debt. Why? Because we think we deserve these things. Well, I deserve this vacation. I've been working hard. I deserve to take my kids to Disney World. You can't afford to take your kids to Disney World. If you don't have the cash for it, if you're not meeting all your obligations, you can't afford to do those things. Some of you need to get a hold of the fact that you can't afford to smoke. We've all seen these people before where they're using their food stamps to buy their groceries and then their cash to buy their beer. If you need food stamps, you can't afford to drink. You can't afford beer. Some of you ladies need to get a hold of the fact you can't afford to go to Starbucks. My wife called me out the other day for saying, something about $8 drinks at Starbucks. Like, that doesn't cost $8. And then somebody told her the drink they get costs like over $7. I was just rounding up. Listen, why? Listen, if somebody can afford an $8 drink, if somebody can afford a $45 drink, they should be able to buy it. I believe in capitalism, okay? But at the same time, are you sure you should be doing that based on your income? Oh, I deserve to have that cup of coffee. I see everyone else doing it. I see, all these, millennials hanging out at the coffee shops all the time. But you know what you don't see? You don't see the debt that they're in. You don't see their therapist bill that they all have. They all have therapists. They're all on medication because they're all under stress because of everything going bad in their life. But you know what? None of them are smart enough to say, maybe I just shouldn't be spending money on this stuff. And you know what? I dare you, to tell somebody you're too poor to drink at Starbucks. And they'll look at you like, you're a bigot, like there's something wrong with you. But folks, if you're not meeting your obligations, if you're under all this stress, you got all these problems like we read in the beginning, you're too poor to do that. You can't afford it. That's where rich people should go to get their coffee. Us poor folks should be going to Casey's, or not even Casey's, probably Walmart, where we can go buy it and then make it ourselves. That's probably what most of us ought to be doing. But, we've just convinced ourselves we're worthy of these things. We deserve these things. And you know what? There's just some things you don't deserve. And people need to plan when it comes to their finances. It says in Luke 14:28, for which of you intending to build a tower sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? Lest haply, after he hath laid the foundation, is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. You have to make a plan for your finances, and you have to do this because you know the priorities in your life. You know what you need. You see, the bank, when most young people especially, they go to a bank And I remember my wife and I, we did this when we first got married. I remember we wanted to buy a house. You know, that's what you're supposed to do, right? Buy a house. So we went, we talked to this realtor, and she sat down and went over, because we didn't know what we could afford. And she was like, well, based on your income, and she went over a few different expenses and things. She's like, you guys could afford this much. And I'm like, at the time, okay, this was in 2003 or 4, I think, we were paying like $400 a month on rent for our house. And she was telling us, and we could barely afford that. And she was telling us that we could afford like more than double that on a mortgage. And I'm like, no, we can't. She kept telling us we could afford that, but I'm like, no, we can't. And then she's just like, she starts talking about all these different things. And one of the things that she was not factoring in, but was very important to me and a priority to me, was our tithe. And the truth is, if we would have quit tithing, that's a lot more we could afford towards a mortgage. But that wasn't an option with us. We weren't going to do that. At the time, I think we only had 2 kids at that time, but we were also planning on having more kids than that. And so the thing is, she's just wanting to get us in a house right now so she can get her commission and everything, but we got to think long term. And so, we're a young couple, 2 kids, not making that much money. But she's telling us we can afford all these things. You cannot trust those people. They don't know what your priorities are. They're punching some numbers in a thing. They're looking up a credit rating. And let me tell you, that credit rating stuff is a bunch of garbage too. When we were in debt, we had a fantastic credit rating because we always paid our bills in time. We'd fulfill our commitments, but we were under a great deal of stress. I read the Dave Ramsey books, got my finances under control. I paid off all of our debt, and for 3 years, we had no debt at all. We didn't even have a credit card. We had no debt, and we had a little nest egg saved. And then I came out here and started the church, and then, didn't take off like I thought it was going to, started getting financial trouble again. But when we moved out here, we wanted to get a loan to buy a house. And I had no credit. My credit rating, nobody wanted to give me a loan for anything. I had no credit, even though I was in a better financial situation than I had ever been in before. But yet I couldn't get a loan on anything because the credit rating stuff is ridiculous, and it's ultimately meant to just keep you in bondage forever. You've got to have a plan. You've got to have a vision for these things. You got to have your priorities figured out, and you need to make the best decision on that. Not people that are trying to sell you something, not people that are trying to give you a loan. They're just going to get you spending as much as they're allowed to get you spending. That they get commissions on these things, but they're not responsible. That bank that gives you that loan, that loan broker or whatever that you work with, they're going to get their fee, and then they're happy. They can go celebrate. You've got to pay that bill for the next 30 years, and it's not their problem. When you get that loan in the car, that person that sells you the car, sets up the loan for you, they're going to get their fee. They're going to get their commission, but you got to pay off that car. You got to make the payments for the next 5, 6, and even 7 years. Some people are doing on these things now. You've got to do that all by yourself. They don't care what happens to you after that. Once their check clears, their worries are over. Yours are just beginning. So you can't do that. You've got to have plans. And so if you have a great salary, who cares if you're wasting all your money? Who cares if you're going into debt? And there's a lot of people said, they might make more money than I do, but they're also paying way more money every year than I am towards interest because of all their loans, paying way more towards taxes. Property taxes are a killer in a lot of places. Okay. You might have one person, they've got $100,000 home, and another person with $100,000 home, but the one's paying, $10,000 a year on taxes. The other one's paying 2 or 3, on taxes. So right there, we've got that other person, they're making more money than you, but there's like an extra $7,000, $8,000 a year they've got going out just for property tax. And you've got to factor all those things in. And so again, my house, one of the reasons I chose to buy that house is because the taxes weren't that bad. I picked an area that had lower taxes. Now it doesn't have some other things that, higher tax areas have, but I couldn't afford those areas. And I don't want, that much of my money going towards property tax. All they're going to do with that is just waste it on the public school system that I'm not even going to send my kids to. So, you've got to think about all those things. And so there's a lot of people making six figures, but they're wasting so much money on interest, on taxes, or just on, just the area that they live in. They will brag. Some people will even move to an area, because, hey, I can make an extra $10,000, $15,000 a year if I go to this location. Okay, but how much more is it going to cost you to live in that area? Because what it all comes down to, it's not about salary. Some of you might have that goal. I just want to make six figures. Okay, but understand, you might be able to live just as good, making well under that if you're in a different area. So it's not about how much you have coming in. It's also what you have going out. So some people, they have a lot more going out because of things like, maybe physical problems. Maybe they've got some kind of physical problem that requires them a medication or some kind of treatments that are really expensive. So yeah, they're making more, but they're not really better off. So I guess I say all that to say, when it comes to class, it's not just about what your salary is. It's about really how you live. And how you live is mostly determined by your expenses. And there is just no end to things that you could spend your money on. There's absolutely no end. We are all surrounded with advertisements of people trying to sell us things that we don't need like never before. In Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 10, Solomon says, "And whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced at all my labor, and this was the portion of all my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun." So here we have Solomon, who whatever he wanted, he went after it. And he was successful at getting it. And he was able to do that. I mean, Solomon was super, super rich. But you know what? That didn't even make him happy. And, you have to figure out, and preferably let the Bible decide your priorities rather than yourself, your flesh, or especially just society in general. You cannot let them decide what's going to make you happy, because they tell you it's all these things of the world, the things of the flesh. Those things do not make you happy. No one will ever be more successful than Solomon when it comes to obtaining wealth. But I do want peace. There are certain things that I have that I want, and I'll say more about priorities here in a little bit. But I want you to notice, though, this mentality of just trying to get whatever the heart desires, that is something that a lot of people are going after. And I'm telling you, this Zoomer generation that we have, they are the most entitled generation yet. They think that they just deserve it all. They think because, it's just their birthright. And a lot of it's because, they were taught that in the public school. The politicians are telling them that, but it's not reality. And so you've got to understand that you are constantly being bombarded with people just trying to get more out of you, trying to appeal to the lust of your flesh. And we can't fall for these things. There are so many things that you could just waste all your money on. Because again, let's just say, pretend you're me right now, all right? And you're sitting around thinking about your financial woes and all your financial problems. Like, man, if I could make an extra $10,000 in a year, I'd be so much better off. Okay. But at the end but think about, all right, $10,000. You say, man, that would make a huge difference. If my salary went $10,000, I'd be satisfied. Listen, I just went to Bass Pro Shop a couple weeks ago. Do you know how fast you could spend 10 grand in a place like that? I mean, there are so many things that I want there. And I could make an extra 20,000 a year. And I'm not going to be satisfied walking into Bass Pro Shop. I want to get one of those ATVs that they sell there. Those cost more than 10 grand. I don't need one. I want one. The boats. I always look at the boats when I go there. I feel like I should be a boat person. I live by the river. I feel like I'm that class of person, that should have a boat. But I've never had a boat. I've got a kayak. I spent $300 on years ago. That's all I've ever been able to afford. But now I can't even take my kayak anywhere because my truck broke down, and it won't fit in any of my vehicles. So I've got a kayak that just sits there, because I can't afford the things that I need to haul it around. And I'm not trying to have a pity party. I'm just saying all this is stuff that is not a necessity, but they are desires. We all have those things. For some of you, it might be, I don't know. So we all have different things we could spend a fortune on if we wanted to. Okay. But at the same time, what people need to realize is all that's all extra expense, and you're never going to have enough stuff. You're never going to be satisfied with all these things. But what we have today are people who have had no self-control, and they've gone and they've ran up debt. They've went and bought all these things. They've made all these financial commitments. They've done all these 12 months, same as cash. They've done all these things. They've got all these commitments. They've signed leases for different things. And now, as a result, they act like a different set of rules apply to them. And this is a pet peeve of mine. This ticks me off. But I've known people who they just feel like they are that upper middle class person that deserves to live in a neighborhood that I will admit I cannot afford to live in. And so they go, they get the loans, they sign the leases, they make the commitments, they do all these things. And then they find themselves in great financial stress. And then when you start talking about things, like tithing or something, they act like they are exempt from that. Well, because I've got all this debt. Oh, I can't afford to do that because, of my taxes. I have this, I have this expense, I have that expense. And they're always talking about these extra expenses they have. And like that makes them an exception to the rule. Listen, I could go do any of that. They'll talk, I can't afford to do this because, I've got the $600 car payment. Well, I could go get a $600 car payment if I wanted to, but I chose not to because I'm responsible, because I understand, I have priorities, and you are trying to exempt yourself from things that everyone should be doing. And you try to use the fact that you've got all these other expenses. I've got student loans. I couldn't have gone and gotten student loans. And then you act like a victim. And look how many people today are acting like victims because they're struggling to make it because of their student loans. I could have went and got student loans, but I didn't. And then now these people, they're acting like the government should give them a bailout. Why? Why should you get a bailout for your bad decision? I could have went and made that same bad decision. But no, you felt like you were, it was your birthright to be in that class of people to go to college. Some of you need to get a hold of the fact that you can't afford to go to college. You need to get a hold of that. Some of you need to get a hold of the fact you shouldn't be driving certain vehicles. You shouldn't be living in certain areas. You shouldn't be going to certain stores. Some of you shouldn't even be shopping at Walmart for clothes. You should be shopping at Goodwill for clothes. Oh, I can't believe you would say that. Somebody needs to tell you that, because you're going and you're living above your means, and it's creating all kinds of problems. It's creating all kinds of stress. And it's like people, they just can't accept the fact that I shouldn't be doing certain things, that I can't afford it. But you know what? The rules are not different for you just because you got yourself in debt or because you have obligated yourself to more than what you could handle. And so that other person, they're doing the things that they should be doing. They're doing, they're fulfilling their obligations. They're able to do that because they've been responsible, because they've lived below their means, which is what all of us should be doing. But, it's hard. And it's hard if you're watching advertisements all the time, if you're on social media watching what everybody else is doing. Because listen, the people, they don't, what you don't see on social media when people are posting all the pictures of their vacations and all the, living it up that they do, you don't see the late fees on other things and how they're overdoing other stuff. I mean, folks, I've seen people before, and I knew them well enough. Posting pictures of themselves going to Disney World after they got fired from their job. It's like, what is wrong with you? Why would you do that? You know why? Because you can in this country. There's all kinds of ways that you can give yourself what you want, but folks, it comes with a price tag. And when you decide to pay later, it's always worse. It's always more expensive. And that same person, what they're probably going to do, because of all the debt and things that they racked up and all the trouble they got themselves into, they'll just act like a victim and they won't do things they should be doing. They won't be a giving person. They won't be generous. They'll be selfish and they'll act like, I can't be generous because I've got this and this and this. I'm a victim. Any of us can get a credit card and max it out. Any of us could do it. You give me any credit card, I can go to Bass Pro Shop and I'll max it out tomorrow. That would be an easy thing to do. But that's an irresponsible thing, and you have no right to do that. And the Bible says in Matthew chapter 6, because it's all about priorities. Okay? For me, peace of mind is a priority. Freedom is a priority. I do not want to be in financial bondage. I don't want that. But ultimately too, the will of God is my priority. The Bible says in Matthew 6:31, therefore take no thought saying, what shall we eat or what shall we drink or withal shall we be clothed? And those are all needs, by the way. For after all these things do the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knoweth that ye have need of all these things. And most of you aren't in trouble because of clothing, because of food, and things like that. It's because of all your extra things, your extravagant stuff. It says, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. The things that you need will be given to you if you seek after the things of God first. Those have to be the priority. And so, let me just say, while, the finances in our house has always been, difficult. While I've never had an income to brag about or that many people would admire. Well, let me just say that, the Lord has allowed us to do a lot. We all have our things we want to spend money on, things like that. I like to travel. I've been blessed. I've still, even though I'm not a rich person, I've been able to go a lot of places and do a lot of things that a lot of people who make a lot more money than me have not been able to do. How did that happen? The Lord's worked those things out for me. I have not prioritized those things in my life, yet I've still been able to do those things. And there are other things that I've always wanted. I've always thought it'd be nice to have some of these things that I still haven't gotten. But you know what? I'm convinced that if the Lord wants me to have them, I'll probably get them anyway. That I believe I'm more likely to get them if I remain in God's will. And so that's my priority. I just want to stay in God's will. And, the truth is, too, even if I never get those things, I believe in eternity. I believe in the millennial reign of Christ. And you know what? God knows what I want, what I need, what will be fulfilling more than I ever will. And it's the same for you, too. And what you need to do when it comes to your finances, you just need to get your priorities right. God wants us being cheerful givers. God wants us God wants us taking care of our families. God wants us fulfilling our obligations. And, you just need to ask yourself before you just go extravagantly buying things that you can't afford, should I be doing this kind of thing? And, when it comes to being poor, it's a tough thing for people to cope with. But, we've learned to cope with it over the years. And I think one of the ways that we've coped with it is I like to find humor in everything. I mean, we've sing songs about being poor and stuff. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I've got a few of them right here. I think I'm going to close with this. And that is, I love Yo Mama jokes. I absolutely love Yo Mama jokes. And I don't know, there's something about poor stuff that is so funny to me. I like shows about poor people. I think just because I can relate. I like hearing stories about poor people just because, I've been there before. And so I can relate. And Yo Mama So Poor jokes are, and folks, I was reading these things. I was laughing so hard. I would embarrass myself if I did that right now. So I'm going to try to read some of these just to be a blessing to those of you that have struggled financially. And if I start laughing uncontrollably, I'm going to have to quit doing it. So I don't know if I can do these without laughing, but here we go. All right. And you're going to think I'm weird because some of you aren't going to think these are that funny. These are hilarious. But anyway, so Yo Mama is so poor. I can't do these without laughing. Your mom is so poor, she went to McDonald's to put a milkshake on layaway. I used to do these for our radio program too. I would do jokes all the time. Man, it was hard not to laugh. I am really trying to compose myself here. Your mom is so poor, your family ate cereal with a fork to save milk. Your mama is so poor, her face is on the front of a food stamp. I don't know if I can do this. Your mama's so poor, she bounces food stamps. These and Chuck Norris facts, they get me every time. It's like, your mama's so poor, burglars break into her house and leave money. It's like, your mama's so poor, who comes up with this stuff? Your mama's so poor, she started a Gmail account just so she could eat the spam. Your mama's so poor, she does... I gotta quit. Your mama's so poor, she does drive-by shootings on the bus. Your mama's so poor, everyone lost their jobs during the... When everyone lost their jobs during the quarantine, they asked her for survival lessons. Here's another reason people are so poor, too. They think they're entitled. I've never been able to afford cable, never really wanted cable. I've always just thought, I can't afford it. I can't afford satellite. I've always just recognized the fact I can't afford that. So your mama's so poor, her TV only has 2 channels, on and off. Your mama's so poor, when someone rings a doorbell, she says ding. Last one. Your mama's so poor on Christmas, she bought a videotape of other kids opening presents. I can't handle those. And I feel weird telling jokes where I can't hear anybody else laugh because then I just feel stupid. So I hope other people are laughing out there, but I feel like it's just crickets out there. But anyway, I don't know. Those just make me feel good because as poor as I've ever been, I've never been as poor as Yo Mama. But and either way, I do. Well, I've talked about being poor. I've always, I've always been poor. As far as the earthly speaking, as far as, in the whatever the American poverty level is. But folks, you know what? I've always had vehicles. I've always had transportations. I've always had a home. I've always had clothes to wear. I've always had food to eat. Poor in America is rich anywhere else. And poor in America today, I mean, especially historically thinking, if you are poor in America today, you are living better than a vast majority of human civilization has lived since the beginning of time. And today we think we're poor when we have cars, when we have air conditioning, when we have heat, when we have running water. And, one thing that really puts it all in perspective is, when the Bible writes about Solomon and all the wealth he was obtaining, the Bible talked about how silver wasn't even accounted for. It was like stone. It was like stones. That's how wealthy they were. And folks, we are so rich in this country that we don't even factor in the fact that you're fed, that you have clothing, that you have transportation, that you have a house with heating and air conditioning, that you have a cell phone, for crying out loud. We don't even factor that stuff in. But think about this. While we have all that, people are more depressed than ever. People can even be suicidal. Why is that? You know why? Because our priorities are messed up. Because our thinking is wrong on all these things. We're more stressed out than ever. Why? Because we have gotten ourselves in financial bondage because of bad decisions, because we felt like we were entitled to more. We're entitled to more than just having the basic needs. I should have even more. I should be living like all these upper crusters in this other area. No, you need to be living within your means. And if you have the money to do all those things and to drink the $8 Starbucks drinks and all that stuff, by all means, go and do that. I believe in capitalism. You know what? You spend your money how you see fit. But you know what? Please don't get yourself in, major trouble to where you have all these health problems that we talked about, that come with financial stress a lot of times. And so if you get anything from this today, just some of you need to get a hold of the fact that you're poor, that you're lower class. And I'm not speaking down to you. I'm right there with you. I accept what I am. I'm okay with acting my wage. I understand what it is. And some of you out there, the way you are trying to live with your salary, you remind me of that lady that's like 60 going on 16 that dresses like a teenager when she's way too old to be dressing like a teenager. You're like that. I gotta be careful how I say this. You're like that large woman that thinks she's going to look like the model in that outfit she's wearing, and she does not look like the model that was in that outfit that she saw advertised, and it's repulsive to people. You're like that. You're like that old. I'm sick of seeing these preachers that are like in their 50s and 60s, and they're trying to act like they're one of these hipster skinny jean types. It's like, dude, you're too old. You're too fat. You don't look good dressed that way. You're not impressing anybody. You're old. Okay. And I've always had a policy, never trust a man who wears a wig. Never trust a man who, has to dye his hair like he's a young guy and stuff like that. Just age gracefully, for crying out loud. And yes, we do need Chuck Norris facts. Maybe I'll bring those out here one of these days. Chuck Norris facts. I don't know why. Yo Mama jokes and Chuck Norris facts. I can barely read those things. They make me laugh so hard, and there's something about them that those two things just tickle my funny bone like nobody's business. But anyway, I hope this was a help to you, and I just want to challenge you, especially younger guys too. Said I'm just kind of giving you some general information today, but some of you need to figure out what you can actually afford, and because there's a lot of things to factor in. Somebody's going to tell you you can afford $1,000 months on rent or mortgage or something like that, but you might not be able to. And it's not as simple as just, well, how much are you making? No, there's a lot of things you got to factor in there. Again, family size, where you live, what are your taxes? There's a lot of stuff. And I would encourage you to read, books like Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. There's a lot of good principles in there that will help you do that. And I'll tell you, when I read that book, and then I went and I put a budget together, I started seeing where I was like, wow, I have no business spending this much money in this area. I'm too poor. I'm somebody who should do without those things, even though I feel like I deserve them because I'm me. My income does not agree. And so, you know what you do? You just do without those things. And you know what? I'm just going to tell you guys right now too, it's not fun. You're not going to have fun telling your wife, hey, we're lower class. We shouldn't be going to Starbucks. We're lower class. We shouldn't be shopping for clothes at the mall. We should be going to Salvation Army. It's not going to go over real well. But you know what? That's what you need to hear. You gotta get your priorities right. And I hope, and I'll say too, Dave Ramsey's book, More Than Enough. I think that book is the best one for just kind of getting your mind right on these things. Total Money Makeover is more about the facts and the numbers. But at the end of the day, it's a behavior problem. And that book probably helped me the most when it came to that. And so I would definitely recommend those things. But either way, that's all I wanted to cover for today. So hope it was a help and a blessing to you. Thank you all for joining us live, and we will see you all next week.